My friends, welcome to another episode of Faith Unraveled, where we discuss the chapter of life after an awakening. Today, Jamie and I are going to be discussing spirituality. The most common question that we get from people in the comments, the most common question we get is, what do you believe in now? If you're not Mormon anymore, are you Christian? Do you believe in Jesus? Are you Buddhist? Have you joined another church? What do you believe in now? I think we've kind of been lucky to land in a similar place, although I'd say,
similar but different.
It's an evolving process, but we'd love to share with you some of the evolution that we've had in our spirituality. I think we both consider ourselves like spiritually agnostic, and it's kind of led by curiosity. And the big thing from today's episode is we're going to talk about differentiating from teaching a belief system versus teaching a value system. So because we are still in the midst of raising kids, this is a big topic. It's one thing when it's a very personal journey for you. And it's another thing when you have been taught that a good parent is a parent that teaches the doctrines of a religious belief that you're associated with. And for a lot of families, this is very important. But for us, in stepping away from religion, we had to determine, how do we guide our kids with a good value system and with the possibility of spirituality in their own lives without necessarily indoctrinating them? Because as we know, there's dogma even outside of religion. There's dogma everywhere. So we wanted to really get away from doing that. And today's going to be the first episode in a series that we're going to do on spirituality.
I was going to say, one of the things that is scary as we jumped down the rabbit hole was this idea of good. We've always had a structure in our life that defined what good was and defined a path to get to good.
Goodness. Yes.
Once you jump down the rabbit hole and you lose that structure, then you're into a mode where you do not know what good is anymore. And that structure, you have to rebuild it very differently than what you had in the past. It's not a defined path forward. It's not a defined, hey, you need to do this step, this step, this step, this step, and you'll get it to the celestial kingdom. The question is there even a celestial kingdom, or is there any heaven in
an afterlife?
In the afterlife? Is there consciousness that exists beyond this life? All that is unknown. In this life, we will never know whether we exist beyond this. It's just there's no facts to tell you that. And so that path is very different for everybody, where the church gives you a defined path and everybody just kind of follows that path. Now, what we'll see, for us at least, is you have a path, I have a path, and those paths might not align, but they could be similar in some ways.
To me, the scariest part of having a faith crisis, and the reason that people ask this question about what do you believe now, is that if you've been a religious person, you equated teaching your children your religious beliefs to being a good parent.
Yeah.
Like, the way that you parent well is to teach them the gospel of Jesus Christ. And without that, it becomes very scary. And I remember as a religious parent that there were a lot of other values that I felt I can't teach everything. So if I fall short on teaching my kids how to clean and organize their rooms, which I did, I will at least teach them that having prayer and scripture on a nightly basis is important. If I don't teach them the value of, something academics, let's say, then what I will teach them is the value of dressing modestly and fulfilling your church callings. So everything within my wheelhouse of parenting was in the gospel arsenal. That's where all of my tools were. It was all in that gospel study. Teach them the gospel and they will succeed. And I thought, well, whatever I don't teach in terms of organization, time management, the mission will then take care of that. So I'm just going to teach my kids to be faithful to the gospel, and then they're going to go on missions and everything else is going to take care of itself. So when that falls through, you kind of lose your blueprint. And that's really scary as a parent, because you want your kids to be good. But where does goodness come from after leaving a religion?
Yeah, the church does a lot of teaching our children. We do teach it in the home, but the church is what anchors it to that. And so when you lose that anchor, when you lose the church on every Sunday teaching about
Word of
Christ, the word,
wisdom.
yeah, you have to then figure out like, how do you replace that in the home, or do you replace that in the home? It might not be a value system to replace that in the home. And so I think a lot of people that come in the comments and then ask us the question where we're at, I see a lot of being Mormon, they'll come in and say, hey, do you believe in Jesus Christ now? Or do you believe in God? And I think, it becomes a very different conversation than it was in the church. Like, you have that defined path. You no longer have that defined path outside the church.
One thing that we've told our kids is that we will support them wherever they land in terms of religious belief. And we really want them to know that we will support them in that.
Yeah.
So because we're no longer teaching a religious belief system, what we have defaulted to instead is teaching them a value system. And what I would hope is that wherever they land, religiously speaking, is going to be in alignment with that value system. So I'm going to talk today about what that process was like in figuring out what are the values that I think are important to teach our kids. And then I trust that they're going to use their own minds and their own intellect and their own inner wisdom to determine then what value systems they want to contribute to the world. And if they end up having kids, what they're going to pass along to their children. But ultimately, our two core ones are to love and find joy in life and to do no harm to others. So those are the kind of the two foundations. And then we're going to talk about how the rest evolved.
Can I ask you, how do you define spirituality now? What like, both of us are on a different path and we might define this differently, but I would love to understand how you define spirituality now.
This is a great question. And I think that for me, spirituality is kind of in a number of different categories. I think mindfulness and a connection with self is one part of it. I think for some people, spirituality is the belief or curiosity in something greater than ourselves. You could call it God, you could call it the universe. For me, that is what I define as mysticism. And because it's a mystery, I value curiosity. So I don't necessarily believe that there is something greater, but I hope that there's something greater. And I think that it's fine to be curious about that. But the other elements of curiosity, which to me play a bigger part in a role of personal development, have to do with connection with others. So communal spirituality, the connection with family, the connection with friends. And other areas are having a sense of purpose. A big one in our family has been the discussion on mindfulness, being aware of your emotions, being aware of your body, being aware of your thoughts and how they affect your emotions. To me, that all goes in with this discussion on spirituality. And that's why it doesn't really matter if you're atheist or if you're a religious person. Spirituality is so much more about the development of the mind and just who you are as a person.
Yeah, I was going to say.
What are your thoughts on what spirituality to you?
Well, and I'll take a step back on it. Like when we were Mormon, you would say that sex was a spiritual event for you, right? And I struggled with that. I'm like, no, sex isn't spiritual at all. And the reason why I felt that way is when I defined spiritual, it was in a pew, in a church, looking up at the bishop. And I'm like, there's no way in hell that sex is spiritual, because that's how I thought. I thought spiritual equals organized religion. And as I jumped down through the rabbit hole, I found out that spiritual is very different than organized religion. That I feel now spiritual is about like your individual self and enhancing and growing your individual self with whatever value system that you want to create. It's belonging to a community or belonging to this grand earth that provides such substance and life for us to experience. It's nature for me at times, where I see birds flying, or it's sitting on a beach and listening to the waves crash in. It's very different than an organized structure that kind of confined you in a certain box and told you how to get to life. Now it's kind of whatever, like you said, your curiosity to believe, like, are we in a simulation? Are we a petri dish in an alien? And so I enjoy like thinking through all these different, is there anthropomorphic God out there that's kind of driving,
and like an interventionist God?
Exactly, what goodness is. And like Neil deGrasse, is that his name? Mm-hmm. He has a good
Neil
thing.
Tyson deGrasse, I think.
Yeah, he has a good thing where he talks about like this God, and it conflicts with kind of how life is. Like there's so much pain and harm in the world, and would a God that's good kind of drive that? And there leaves questions, and it's okay now to think about all those different types of questions, where in the past you couldn't. Like if you thought outside the box, you could be called anti, or you're not following like what the church prescribes you to believe. Where now you have this opening to where you can like really expand yourself individually in your mind and beyond to all these different types of concepts. You might not know what concept is real because we don't have any facts, but you can think about it and you can enjoy the presence that you live in now.
I really love this idea of curiosity. And you had mentioned the word modalities. So when I hear modality, I think of ritual. Mm-hmm. And there's many different things that you can explore under the umbrella of ritual. There's plant medicines, things like psilocybin and cannabis, which can, for some people, open their mind to kind of accessing new ideas. There are people who speculate that that could be coming from another source. But again, it's okay to approach these things with curiosity, not knowing for sure, is this something that my brain created, or was this a message from the universe or from God, or who knows what. There's also rituals around journaling. I started in this series, we're going to go into some different books that we've used to help us explore this spiritual process. And it's still an evolving process for us. So we haven't landed anywhere explicitly, but the daily writings is a beautiful ritual that can really open up the mind and open up this connection to source, some believe. There's also the rituals of meditation. Meditation has been huge for you. Probably the biggest game changer since leaving religion for you has been mindfulness, I would say. Meditation has been huge. Of course, I mentioned the plant medicines. Also, prayer for some people is a big one. For some people, participating in religion is part of their spiritual practice. And I would say that's valid too. A lot of people, even who deconstruct even Mormonism or Christianity, want to continue to participate in those arenas because they feel like it is a place where they can access spiritual experiences.
And it also brings community too. I think
Right.
A lot of times they enjoy the community and want to be part of that community.
Yeah. And like there's certain values within the church even that you may choose to carry with you as like core tenets of your value system. So like service is one. We all have had these moments where you have served someone and you feel it inside of you. I don't know exactly what that is, but that connection is for me a big component of spirituality. And so the way that we treat others. One thing I just want to say though, before diving into some of the values that we've landed on, is that we no longer try to indoctrinate our kids with a specific belief. And instead, what we're really focusing on are the values. But these aren't things that you teach in a sit-down lesson. That's okay to talk about them, but where are they going to learn them more? By watching you and by experiencing these things with you, watching how your parents respond to others, watching how your parents handle conflict, watching how your parents handle whatever. Like that's how, that's how kids learn.
I was going to say
more than lecturing, right? Through lessons.
Yeah. I was going to say we also, one of the values I think we instill with our kids is curiosity. Like it's okay to think. It's okay to
explore.
It's, you don't have to have a binary mindset. You can keep all things open, and it's okay to explore all those different angles or modalities so you can figure out like what resonates with you. And then whatever resonates with you, you can go in that direction. To me, this is an evolution. Like I believe if I live to be 99 years old, I will still be evolving my spirituality at that time. It doesn't like you get to a point and I'm like, oh, I hit the peak. I am done. For me, at least, I see that this is a constant evolution over time. So
I agree totally. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to have Britt Hartley on the show, and she's an author and researcher, and she's gotten her done her work in spirituality. So she's a spiritual director. And one of the things that I thought was most compelling from her that I've noticed in our own family is that when you have chaos in one area, I'm going to totally botch this, so we'll circle back to it when we have Britt on the show. But when you have chaos in one area of your life, it's common to have order come together in another area. And I noticed that when we left religion, I felt very disoriented because I lost a sense of order, because that's what religion is really good for, right? It tells you you've got things really well manicured. You know what to do each moment of the day. Like you know how to run your life. You've got the blueprint to run your life. And so after stepping away from religion, there were certain areas of my life I felt eventually, once I was kind of through the chaos, I felt order start to develop in other areas. So I'm more consistent with my kids about things like homework and rooms and organization and being on time for school and nutrition. Like nutrition is actually a big value system for me because we have autoimmune illness in our family. And so nutrition has become a really big part of that. And so just for us personally, like nutrition has been an area of having a lot more order in our family. That doesn't mean we don't allow like junk food, but it means that we put a strong emphasis on flooding the body with lots of good nutrients, all different kinds of proteins and fruits and vegetables and good foods, right? In addition to the fun foods, right? And so I can see how when there is this chaos, it becomes very natural for you to be drawn to order in some ways. And I do speculate if that's why some people will fall out of one religion and end up in maybe kind of like a cult sort of situation. Apparently that is a really common dynamic for people to get pulled out of one just to go back into another, because we crave order.
Yeah.
And this is all, to me, spirituality is all an important component in discussing all of this. It's really about self-discovery and exploration, right?
100%. It might be good to share kind of our path. Like once we jumped down the rabbit hole, we went through, I think, different, I call it modalities of spirituality during that period of time. Phases is probably a better term, because you enter one phase, you leave that phase, you enter another phase. And I think it might be good for people to hear, because they ask, questions. Because I think depending upon what phase you're in, you might be still a believer in Christianity, or you might be still a believer in even Mormonism. Like I wouldn't be surprised if some people jump down the rabbit hole and they're like, yeah, Brigham Young's kind of a, messed up prophet and took the religion in a weird way. And so I'm going to still believe in Joseph Smith or whatever. I'm sure there's different types of faith deconstructions that happen that land you in different places. So I think it would probably be cool to hear, like, how did you, like, what was the phases you went through, and where are you now?
Well, that's a great question. What a great discussion point. And I would love to hear from our audience too. Like, where did you land? Did you go through different phases? Did you go through like heavy Buddhism, I feel like Buddhism is a safe place to land. Like in general, there's a lot of different ways there's a lot of different ways that you can, that can work. But, when I first deconstructed, I had a strong urge to continue my belief in Jesus. And so initially I bought this book called Jesus Calling, and it has like several variations of it. And it's got like the daily practice. And so I bought this book, Jesus Calling, and it felt so disjointed to me to suddenly not have prayer in scripture, especially because I'll let you share your side of this, but you did not want to participate in any spiritual rituals whatsoever. And at first. And so I would do my new prayer in scripture with the kids where we would try for a little while Jesus Calling. And then I ended up reading Elaine Pagel's Lost Gospels. And that was the start of me deconstructing Christianity. And, but I'm like, wow, but I still really like some of the values taught by Jesus. So how do I do that? Then I started going into like a meditation but a meditation time with the kids. So this time that we always had before bed, that was always our prayer in scripture. And when we deconstructed it, had been Come Follow Me. We had just done almost a year of Come Follow Me when I had my faith deconstruction. Mm-hmm. So I felt like it was just so easy. Like there was just this template to follow. And now what happens when you no longer believe those things? I really had to lean into the values. So it kind of went from Jesus Calling, like Christianity, like eventually I'm thinking maybe we'll even find a church. That only lasted maybe a month or two. Deconstructed Christianity. Then it turned into like a Buddhist, then it just all kind of faded out. And then eventually I just realized I don't have to have a format where I sit my kids every day and teach them and like talk at them and lecture them. And that's what I realized I was doing before. I was indoctrinating them. And so that's when I eventually, and this is all over the course of probably the first year after the faith crisis where I still felt totally lost. But I just kind of got to this point that I realized we don't have to indoctrinate our kids. We don't have to talk at them. We don't have to lecture them and tell them what is and what isn't. We can ask more questions. We can ask them what they believe, what are their ideas, because in reality, talking is a way that we learn. So just having a space to sit and talk safely to your parents about the possibility of a resurrected Jesus versus the possibility of a simulation versus a possibility of a Big Bang and, who knows what's next. So, but I think asking questions is more important to me now than teaching.
Yeah. So during that period of time when you wanted to have, because you wanted to continue doing like family home evening, you wanted to continue doing like scripture and prayer. And I'm like, I'm done. I cannot, like, it was such a trigger for me during those periods of time when you were like, let's say prayer. I'm like, I do not want anything to do. And that related back to the church for me. And I'm like, I don't want anything to do with the church. Right now, I'm trying to figure out, is there even a Mormon God? So it took me, and you guys have shared this on this, it took me a year to figure out whether or not Mormon God was even real anymore. So as you were passing me on like spirituality and going into like curiosity and other phases outside of Mormonism, I was still stuck in there trying to figure out, like, do I still believe that there is this God in heaven that directs everything we do?
When you say Mormon God, you're talking about this construct of a God who's a father, who is married, who had us as children, who is like an interventionist God that you can pray to find your keys.
He knows your name.
He knows your name. He knows you well. He knows you. He loves you more than any of your earthly family or friends or parents do.
Yep, that all the ordinances within the church are like critical for us to receive salvation in the next life. Like, I had to go through step by step and like understand, like, is there a priesthood? Is there a prophet here on this earth? And I had to like kind of work through every single angle. And that's where I went to journals, and like people talk about the CS letter. I went past the CS letter. I went to sources and to kind of walk through the sources to see, like, is the structure that we were taught since we were kids, like, true? And
you have to detangle that, because you don't realize, like, so many people that have shared their testimony with me since leaving the church, they're like, yeah, but Heavenly Father, yeah, but Jesus Christ, and not realizing that, like, everything that we know about the church is from
Joseph Smith.
That fraught past, that person who was what we deem predatorial and having a lot of cult leader characteristics. Yeah. And so if everything that you believe came from them, you have to detangle that.
As I went through the deconstruction of the Mormon God, the next phase of that is going into Christianity, right? You take those same tools that I used to deconstruct Mormon God, and you go right into Christianity. If you read the Bible and see the harm and the death and the judgment that goes with it, and then you find out, like, these are all stories. Like, you listen to some of these biblical scholars and they're sharing, like, hey, we don't even know if Abraham's real. Hey, we don't even know if Moses is real. Yeah, and then they go into, like, these were myths created by this person at this point in time. And then you find out that the scriptures, like the 4 gospels, are created like 80 years. The first gospel is 80 years after. And this is when they didn't even have writing, right? They don't, like, the only people who are writing are your, like, clerics or your educated people, and you don't know how they're taking the situations. And so it's like the telephone game all over again for 80 years. Like, telephone game, 5-6 people in a room at this point in time, you share one thing and something comes out very different, right? Can you imagine 80 years of that? Like, what do you think the story of Jesus is going to be like 80 years after? And then John is 200 years after. And there was this competition that was going on, and that's just human nature and human behavior, right? And then you have a Catholic Church that comes in here and wants to align it with where they want to go. And so,
looking at the beginning days of Christianity and seeing how, like, people would pay for their sins ahead of time. And, like, I just think religion to me at this point is just a way to kind of organize the masses and to keep people in terms of tribalism, keeping people in the same playbook.
Yeah.
And so, if it serves you and you feel like it works well for your family, that's great. We're trying to venture, though, beyond religion and still maintain some semblance of spirituality as an option.
Yeah, and it's okay if someone deconstructions and lands in Christianity, if they still believe in some type of supreme being out there that kind of directs them. No judgment on my end if you are a Christian and you believe, or if you're any other religion and have a belief. I just haven't landed there. So stepping out of Christianity, stepping out of Mormonism, like, what's the next phase of that? That's when you go into, like, that's when it gets real. I'll be honest with you. When you get out of those 2 phases and you're then like, what is this world for? What's the purpose of this life? Are we just a science experiment? Did everything just kind of like flow together? Like, the universe was created and we're just an evolution. And then when everything goes dark, it goes dark, and we never see anything else after that.
It's the nihilism.
That's the nihilism that comes in.
And I will admit that I sort of vacillate between agnostic spirituality and, like, utter nihilism. To me, I kind of go back and forth just because I don't know. And like you said at the beginning, I think there's a good chance that we're going to live and die without having the answers. Maybe there will be some scientific breakthrough that shows us where we came from and you could say the Big Bang, but what happens to consciousness? That's what we haven't discovered. We know where everything came from. We are pretty confident that it came from a Big Bang, but where did consciousness come from? We want to believe that consciousness came from something and that it will continue after. And people use this idea of, like, energy cannot be created or destroyed. And we want to hope that that pertains to our consciousness. But the reality is we really don't know.
We don't. At least that's our belief. We don't know.
Yeah.
How did nihilism impact you? Did you feel hopeless at all?
So nihilism is still impacting me. I toss and turn at night. It's just like the nature of how I sleep. And whenever I toss and turn, I always have this moment of thinking, and this is only since my faith deconstruction. And I don't think I've even told you this, but every night, pretty much since my deconstruction, I have these moments where I roll over, I look at my dark room, I look at you, I think about the kids in the other room and my daughter who lives out of state. And I think in 100 years from now, we're all going to be part of the dirt, and that's going to be it. And there's going to be someone else living in our house, and there's going to be someone else, all new people running the earth. We're going to be gone. They're not even going to know our names in hundreds of years from now. And
does that create hopelessness for you at all?
It doesn't create hopelessness, but I feel very sad thinking about that. And it's never just one thing, right? There's always a multitude of emotions and thoughts going on at once. So the feeling that goes on for me with nihilism is the idea that nothing matters. So what does it matter? But if nothing matters, then why not go for it? Why not do everything you can to create the most beautiful, loving, abundant life there ever was? And it's beautiful that out of this big, vast universe, consciousness even exists. To me, that is a wonder. That is an absolute wonder. It makes me wonder if there's consciousness that exists in plants and other entities and bacteria. And, we haven't discovered it, but it makes me wonder what's possible out there in the universe. And so I think there's beauty in that. And there's also fear, and there's also loss and love and grief and fear. Like the fear just keeps coming back. That's kind of, to me, the biggest undertone of nihilism is fear and how just not knowing.
And how does the now play into that?
Well, I think that if we don't know what's to come, then all we have is what's right now. And if we really want to experience the beauty that is life, we have to experience the now.
And then what if nothing matters, what is then important to you?
What's important to me, the most bottom line of importance, is my connections with other human beings. For me, the phases went after leaving the Mormon faith and being super, super devout LDS and really following that format closely. I went into a short stint in kind of hardcore Jesus phase and teaching and indoctrinating that for probably roughly a month. Then I deconstructed Christianity and went into kind of the oblivion of nihilism for a little while. And then I started opening up to the possibility of something greater than ourselves. And even though that is an element of curiosity, I don't have any proof of it. What I do have proof of is human connection, the value of mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
The value of what I do have proof of is the value of human connection, the value of mindfulness, the value of family, and there's other values that I have found that are important. And so mysticism is an element in my life that falls under the category of curiosity. My spirituality doesn't have any dictation from anyone else. There's no one that tells me how I should or shouldn't do things. I personally am of the belief that our inner core self knows what goodness is, and we are drawn to it. And that's it. How about you? Tell us about your process after leaving the structure of Mormonism.
Yeah, I talked already about like going through Mormon God. I talked about the deconstruction of Christianity. So that all, I think that was about a year and a half, a year of validating Mormon God isn't real. And then probably 3 to 6 months of getting to the point where I didn't believe in Christianity anymore, and I didn't believe in a savior. I do believe in the teachings of Jesus are really good, and I feel like I'm a good person because of that, but I don't necessarily believe that he's a savior anymore. And so as that fell for me, then a lot of things fell. And that's where I think I became very unstable. When I say unstable, I felt like I got into a place where I didn't know what the purpose of myself was. And I didn't know about our relationship. Like, when you don't have the church and you don't have eternal life and you don't have this ceiling anymore that kind of keeps you together, like, what does that mean for me and you? Are we on two individual paths? Or do you even want to be with me anymore after, like, going through this faith deconstruction? Because a lot of how we were connected together was through the church, right? And then I looked at my kids and looked at, like, okay, how did I harm my kids, like, in this system? And so I went through, I think that year and a half of, like, instability for me was around this nihilism and trying to work through, like, what is my purpose in this life? What do I want out of this life anymore? And there was no structure to, like, grab onto anymore. And so how did I then try to figure out, like, what's important to me? And very similar to what you came to is the now became very important. Like, I'm living in the now. I don't know what's going to be in this next life, but I know what I want in right now. I want a connection with you. I want a connection with my kids. I want a connection with my tribe. Like, I want to start building a tribe that I can go out and have fun and enjoy life with.
It sounds like fun was a big value system for you. That became a value system for you. And it's interesting because that's kind of a little bit demonized in the church. And I think in most religions, we don't talk about pleasure. We don't talk about fun.
That became, like, huge for me.
Yeah.
Like, you remember, this is September 2022. I'm like, let's go on a club crawl. Let's go down to San Diego. And our daughter came into town from Utah. And we were like, I was setting it up with my daughter, like, take us out. Let's go dancing. Let's just have fun. And she brought her boyfriend and we just...
They mentored us.
They mentored us. But it was at that point in time, the now and having fun and having... And when I say pleasure, it's not like... it's not life is all about pleasure. Like, there's more to life than pleasure, but pleasure is a very important piece to me in that life. So that's a value that I still carry to this day. I like to go and experience life now. I felt like I was trapped in a box for 45 years. I want to experience the great things of life. And so that's like hiking. That's exercise for me. That's yoga and meditation and getting, like, my individual grounded. And so during that year and a half period of time, as I think I was in nihilism probably for 3 to 6 months out of that, and trying to figure out, like, what's important to me. Once I started figuring out what's important to me, then I came out of it and I'm like, I can't explain. There's certain things I can't explain in my life that has happened, whether I manifested it or a God led me to that or the universe led me to that. I've come to, like, some sort of place to where I don't know if there's a God, but I definitely feel like I have had spiritual experiences. And so trying to figure out, like, what those spiritual experiences mean to me in my life outside of God has been an interesting step forward. And that's where then you go into, like, for me, I went into all this studying around, like, the universe, and I went into Michael Singer and started, like, reading Untethered Soul and what does a soul mean. And then I read in Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now, and then I read Brene Brown's Journey into the Wilderness, where she talks about, like, stepping outside. And that's how I felt like I was doing. I was journeying into the wilderness on my own, and I was developing myself individually so that I could show up to my kids show up to you in this relationship, even though that I didn't even know whether or not the relationship would last beyond this faith crisis. I had come to a conclusion in my mind that if we decided to walk separate paths, that would be totally okay.
I wouldn't say totally okay.
Yeah.
But we resolved that we were going to do the deep dive on our relationship, which was the next phase of deconstruction.
Yeah.
And if that was what
was the outcome,
the outcome, that we would accept what needed to be.
Yeah. Whatever.
And that was ultimately the start of our rebuilding our relationship, which we can talk about in another episode, because that's that's another big question that people give us. It was the first question out of your mom's mouth when you said, I don't believe the church is true anymore. I'm stepping away from the church. She said, are you going to still stay married? Yeah. I mean, it's a really reasonable question because your whole life is built on your religious beliefs. Yeah. So you talked about, sorry.
I wanted to just mention one other thing is energy became very important to me. Like I feel like there's vibrations, positive manifestations. And so I've landed into like, hey, I don't know what it is, but I do think that we're all connected through an energetic level. I can feel a different vibration when I'm with people that I connect with on a deeper level, and I want to continue that vibration. I don't know what it is, don't know where it came from, but I definitely know it's different, and
you sense it.
I sense it, and I like it, and I want to continue it more.
You know, as I'm sitting here talking about it, if I were to boil down spirituality to one thing, I would say it would have to be mindfulness, because when you are aware, you're aware of not only how your thoughts and emotions exist in your body, but you also, if you're practicing mindfulness in your day-to-day life, you're also aware of how your activities and your behaviors and your interactions affect those around you. And that's where the word integrity really took on a new meaning for me, because as a member of the church who leaves the church, integrity for ex-Mormons is usually the top of their value system. To walk away from something, even though you feel like you're losing so much, you're losing your seat at the table, you're losing credibility with people that you love, you're giving up so much. And you're doing it because you feel like you're doing what is right. And that's what integrity is about. Within the church, integrity is about how well you align with what they're telling you is
their
true.
Belief system, yeah.
Right. That's what integrity is in the church, right?
Yeah.
So integrity means something entirely different after stepping away from the church. Isn't just about what beliefs you feel good about. It's how do these beliefs affect others? How do my actions affect others? The word integrate is part of the word integrity. It's all of us working together. And so people will say like, oh, you lose your religious belief. What's going to keep you from killing and raping people? Part of your development and stepping away from religion is to pull in that core of integrity and watching how your behaviors affect the people around you. And that's why no harm becomes one of the major pillars of spirituality, stepping away from religion, because you want to contribute to the world in a way that helps others, not only yourself, but it helps others. And that's where mindfulness comes in. You're aware of how your behaviors affect yourself, your children, your community, the world around you, the earth that we live on. It's all integrated. So that's what integrity means now after leaving the church.
Yeah, it's so amazing at times where some members think once you leave the church, all of a sudden you're going to go and be evil. Yeah, you're gonna hurt people. You're gonna harm people. Now, there's a lot that leave the church and because they're trying to figure things out, they're pendulum swinging, and
they might seem rebellious.
Yeah, exactly. They might seem rebellious, but they're learning. They're being curious. They're trying to figure it out, and some maybe even burn things down in the process. And that's just
unfortunately part of the learning curve.
Exactly, and a lot of this learning might have been in your 20s at the time, and now you're learning what you should have been learning in your 20s, in your 40s, and so with that is that curiosity could cause outcomes that could be painful, right?
Yeah. I think that's why mindfulness is so huge to me, because you really need to be aware as you are in this learning curve and you are going through kind of the rebellion of like trying new things. And maybe that means opening up your sexuality to different people, and it might mean experimenting. And if you do that without mindfulness, you might not be aware of how your actions are affecting your own spirit and someone else's.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's where that mindfulness really comes in, because when we step over the line and we do something that might have hurt other individuals, being rampant with sexuality and misleading people, making them think that you're more serious about the relationship than you are, or getting manipulative with people so that you can fulfill your own sexual desires, things like that. Like a real mindful person would recognize that that's harmful behavior and it's hurting others. And it's not because of the morality associated with sexuality. It's about consent, right?
Yes.
And it's about it's back to that integrity, being honest with the people that you're interacting with. Yeah. That becomes really important when you lose your religious faith. So you had talked about some books that were pretty transformative for you. You had mentioned The Untethered Soul. We talked about the 4 agreements, which we've decided is probably just like a good standard to live your life by. Love the 4 agreements.
Can I talk about just activities that help me define my spirituality? Like books were one. Like books were just, and you named a bunch: 4 Agreements, Untethered Soul, Michael Singer's, Eckhart Tolle's books.
We also explored Gary Zukav's The Seat of the Soul, which is very wooey.
Yeah. So we have a book club. Have we? I don't know if we've talked about it. We have a book club. We kind of put it on pause because I think we read 15 books last year. We're going to bring it back forward again. You wanted to start going back at it. I just needed some time to think.
And maybe we could get some recommendations from the community on books that have helped shape your spiritual path or your life path.
I would love to hear what other people's views on these books. But you
wanted to talk about the actual modalities. So meditation or plant medicines or whatever they are. So for you, what were those things that were big for you? The ritual, the practice.
The books were probably number one for me. The second one is I got into meditation and what the idea of meditation for me is try to separate my mind from my emotion, and being able to identify when my emotion is trying to get a hold of me. And I've had anxiety issues since I was a little kid. I never recognized it was anxiety. I didn't recognize it until after my faith crisis, that this force that had always drove me, whether it was positive or negative. Like the anxiety drives me from a positive perspective, but it also drives, a negative. Like I get frustrated easy. And so being able to understand that and control that, it grounded me.
I would say it's also made you more flexible in your mindset. I don't think I ever appreciated until watching your transformation on how important flexibility is. Yeah. People who are not flexible are really impossible to live with. And I'm not saying
I was impossible to live with.
What I think is that our church mindset made me less flexible. And maybe your anxiety made you less flexible. But I do think that when we are more mindful, we do have more flexibility in seeing other people's view of things. Yeah. And it makes you a better partner. You had made this statement and it was so transformative to me. You said, if you want to change the relationship, you have to start with the individual. When the individual does the work, that transforms the relationship. When you transform a relationship, you transform a family. Yeah. So your entire family dynamic is going to shift as you work on yourself and you become more mindful and you do the work. Then your relationship's going to get better, and then your kids are going to heal. And then you can model these things for your kids as well. So I think that's the most important statement. Yeah. And so much about this is mindfulness again. Yeah. And so I put it under the umbrella of spirituality.
Yeah. And what's interesting, and we've talked about this, our kids say that we're very different people, like prior to the faith deconstruction to now. Like our daughter says, I miss the old parents to some certain extent, because she lived with them for 21 years of her life.
Well, and she's experiencing that difference between order and chaos.
Yeah.
I think that's what she's feeling. We had such a strong sense of order
Yeah.
in the house. And then when the religion goes, that's a really new thing to get used to.
Yeah.
Living
Yeah.
a more flexible, open-minded.
Yeah. And I think she loves the new us, but
It's hard.
Yeah. But there was a death of how we were in the past versus where we are today. And a lot of that's around spirituality, I would say, and the mindfulness that and our views are very different than what it was before. The other thing that was very huge for me is health.
Oh,
like
yeah.
getting into exercise. My dad and my mom went through a heart attack and a stroke, and I realized real quick that I needed to prioritize health as part of that. So health is part of my mindfulness journey. Also, I go into the sauna, I meditate in the sauna. And so I feel like my transformation was not just a spiritual, like mindset transformation, but also a physical health transformation as part of this. So
I love that. Okay, so you talked about meditation, you talked about book study, you talked about health and nutrition, what you eat and exercise, and then there's one other that's yours that you left out.
Is it nature?
Yeah.
So we started like taking hikes all the time and driving down to the beach and walking on the beach, and that became a safe place, a peace place.
It was also a routine, and I have to say, back to this conversation of chaos and order, having routines can feel really good. And so for a while we had and it's okay to change routines.
Yeah.
For a while we had the routine of going hiking every Sunday. And sometimes we would do it Saturday and Sunday. And that felt good because it replaced church. And another tradition that we have, or routine, I'll call it a routine, is as soon as we got an electric vehicle, we started driving to the beach every week. Mm-hmm. And so every Saturday or Sunday, we go down to Encinitas or Carlsbad. I'm just like a 15, 20-minute drive. Yeah. And just drive along the beach or have lunch.
PCH 101. We start at Carlsbad, go all the way down to Del Mar and come back. Good. And then we do a lot of talking during that period of time too. And sometimes we stop and walk. And it's
amazing as you're going through this, if you're with a partner, that there is a lot to talk about. Mm-hmm. Like suddenly you have so much to talk about. And when we were in the church, I felt like there was very little to talk about, unless it was like this conflict that we always had of you wanting us to have more sexual expression in our relationship. And I wanted to have more gospel focus. Yeah. And it's amazing how just like surrendering all of that, we've got now so many different things to talk about, so much exploration, and doing a book club together gives you a ton to talk about.
Yeah. So with that is, part of mindfulness is this authenticity, right? Is you now don't like want to, the church, you mask a lot because even to your partner, I felt like I masked to you, not wanting to show you. I wanted to show this great priesthood holder all the time, even though I wasn't, but I had to.
That's what you felt like you should be.
Yeah, that's what I felt like I had to project. Now I don't have to project anything. Now show up as I am in the relationship and communicate like certain things that are very important to me, and you not get defensive about those things. And you can share things to me that you're not defensive because we come from an authentic place.
And you feel more safe, maybe.
And feel more safe because we're in this spiritual environment that doesn't constrain us to like, you need to be this way anymore. Now you accept me for who I am, no matter where I'm at. And I accept you for who you are, no matter where you're at. That's how we've landed. Like, and it's not a prescribed path forward. And it's been very great. Like there's unknowns. We don't know kind of where we're going, but we're happy with where we are in the now.
Yeah, I love that. So as you describe your spiritual modalities, like being out in nature and exercising and like just eating healthfully, living in the now, those all resonate with me as well. One other component that was really big for me was I read a book called The Artist's Way. And I read it because of Elizabeth Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. It was a book that I read when I was still a member of the church, but there were things that she talked about in Big Magic, which was like the human connection to creativity. And it's kind of this idea that creative ideas are kind of their own entities that float around in the ethers, and that creatives will get in touch with these ideas. And she uses all these stories of how people created really amazing things, and that they all kind of worked on this notion that it was coming from something bigger than themselves, and that they were able to kind of just work as a conduit to bring to life this creative project. And she even talks about like Michelangelo with the David, and she talks about authors and things like that, and where these ideas can kind of even bounce from one person to another. She talks about the idea of like multiple discovery. Yeah. And what I discovered in my faith crisis is that I had this connection to creativity that I sort of accessed through things like prayer. And that's what I always did as a member of the church. And when I lost my faith and I lost my religion, it kind of felt like the lights went out for a while. And what I realized is that what I lost was that connection to
your
creativity. Yeah, I lost my connection to creativity. And there's so much that you learn in the church, at least I did, that taught me how to connect to that. Like there was this one Dieter Uchtdorf talk where he talked about creating things, and that all we have to do is have a desire to create. And that's actually a technique for getting in touch with your creativity. So like if you wanted to write a book, the idea is that you would have this desire to do it, and that the way that Elizabeth Gilbert explains it is that you kind of make this agreement, and that all of the tools necessary to create that book are going to now come to you, and you're just going to work as a conduit to take in that information. So it is a spiritual idea, because it's this idea that there's this greater wisdom out there, and that you're kind of downloading it. And as a member of the church, I really believed that. It was kind of a part of my belief construct, this idea of creativity. And when I lost my faith and I kind of felt like the lights went out, it felt very dark. I went into a place of depression, and I stayed there for quite a long time, and I was just really seeking. And I said to my friend, I feel like, I don't know if I'm like, if it's like a mental health disorder, if I'm just in crisis, or I'm not sure what's going on. And she said, you might just be in the fallows right now. Sometimes in life, when everything closes down on us, it forces us to go into the cultivation phase. It might not be the phase of our life where we're producing all these things. It's the phase of life where we're in the dirt and cultivating. What's important at that time is gathering resources and thinking and running through ideas and just taking in lots of new concepts and not making any big concrete decisions, but just knowing that you're in that cultivation phase. And that was why books became so important to me at that time. And when I read The Artist's Way, it taught me about this practice that I just call the daily writing, or the morning pages. You can call it the morning pages. And it's where you sit down with a journal and you just write down everything that comes to you for like 15 minutes, or like the goal is like 3 pages. And you can write just like chicken scratch. It's just a way to like open up your mind, and it's almost a form of meditation. Free writing. You're just allowing those creative concepts to come through you. And it will start with just getting everything, all the clutter out of your mind. And so you might be hopping back and forth between, oh, this was really frustrating at carpool this morning, and oh, we were out of bread, so I couldn't make a sandwich for my kid, and blah, blah, blah. It's just this idea of like taking everything out of your mind and putting it on paper, and doing that every single day. The idea is that like opens up this channel to where you're accessible as a creative conduit. And so for me, I just went to an Elizabeth Gilbert talk, and she said during her talk that there are times in life that you're waiting for that spark to like come and visit you and like give you the idea, the inspiration, and it just feels like it's not coming. It's not coming. Like, why does it feel so dark? Why does it feel like the lights went out and I feel useless. I feel like, and this is where the nihilism comes in. I feel like it's pointless. I feel like I have no purpose. I feel like I have no ambition. Like just the feeling of like, I used to be like a very productive, ambitious person, and I don't know where that went. And for me, the greatest development in my own spirituality was getting back in touch with that and realizing that those creative experiences still exist. And to be honest, that's kind of where this podcast developed, because I was in such a low. And as I was in the fallows and I was gathering all this information and I'm reading all these books, and I realized at that point, I have to do something creative. And I realized that that's what the TikTok was for me. And so you said, why don't you take all of the, like, there's always kind of this pressure to like, if you're going to have a side hustle, have it be something that makes money. And you were like, well, what if you just threw that out? Just throw out that idea and just focus on the creative endeavor. Like, what would you do if, because you were willing to engage me in this conversation about creativity, right? So you're like, what would you do if you could do any creative project? What would that look like to you? And that's where the idea of the podcast came about. And I'm like, I have no idea if this is ever anything that's monetizable, but this is what we're calling a passion project. What I am passionate about right now is connecting with people as they go through their faith crisis. And for someone else, what they're passionate about might be ceramics, and it might be writing a book, and it might be gardening, and it might be playing piano and just getting your old music out of your piano bench and like playing old music. But for me, there is this incredible energy that I rely on. It is an actual life source that comes from creation. I have to be able to create. And if I'm not doing that, then I feel useless. I feel like, you know, I don't feel my purpose unless I'm creating something. But this has been a very important step in me, like almost kind of a rebirth for me. The creative process has been a rebirth for me. And also because of my coaching business, I was already really experienced with, like, I already had a lot of practice on being on video and creating online content and things like that, and coaching too. And I feel like that's kind of still in my wheelhouse here as we're sitting here having these conversations. So, but this is what I love. I love connecting with people through like a digital medium. And so that's where my creativity practice is now, but creativity is like
part of your spirituality,
probably the biggest portion of my spirituality.
That's part of spirituality for you. I saw you starting to, it's like you were swimming in circles.
Yeah.
And you felt like you weren't getting anywhere with it. And a lot with that came depression. And I felt the pain that you were going through in my own heart as I watched you try to figure out, like, where do you want to go next in your life? And I strongly believe exactly what you were saying around creativity, that, and I read Big Magic too. That was one of the books that we read together. It's a form of manifestation. Like you were manifesting, like you needed some more to go to, whether we call it manifestation, we call it a prayer, we call it a spell. I mean, it's all the same thing. You're giving, you're surrendering. You use that term, surrendering to the universe what you wanted to do, and what came back to you was this idea, which since then has given you purpose and direction, and you feel like you're doing something that's valuable. To me, that's the universe just guiding you. Like, And that's the spiritual side of things.
For anyone that really wants to open up to this, I really recommend the book Big Magic, and the daily pages that is
Artistic
taught
way.
in the artist's way is probably the biggest thing. And it's like making this agreement with whatever powers are out there, whatever energies are out there, making this agreement that you are a willing recipient, that you are a willing participant, and that you're willing to make an agreement with the creative process. And it's so weird because as soon as I start doing it and I'm doing my daily pages, I will, Jamie is my witness, wake up at 4 a.m. or 4:30 a.m. with the ideas just buzzing, buzzing. And you have to be willing to put down your distractions. That was the other big thing I got from Elizabeth Gilbert's talk. She said, how much are you willing to dedicate to this? You need to put away your phone. You need to put away your social media. Like, listen to the things that are going to inspire you and light you up, but then you got to go do it. You have to be disciplined in this process too. So there's your order. You know, you've got your chaos and you've got your order. And part of the creative process is disciplining yourself.
Yeah.
And
So that's
been huge for me.
That was a big activity to help you drive your spirituality and where you are currently today.
And as we're sitting here talking about it, think of all of the creative opportunities there were in the church. For me, it was music. I learned how to play the piano as an adult because I wanted to play piano at church. I was always participating.
You're very scrupulous on your scripture reading and your prayers.
But I'm just saying with like creativity though, there was so much available in terms of creativity with music. We also had like musical performances with like different plays, like Women at the Well. And we did like the Joseph Smith, you know, his 100-year celebration. And anyway, but if you think about it, those are all creative outlets. So for people who are very creative, that's the kind of thing that gives you life. You feel like for a creative, you feel like that's what gives you life.
So part of your spirituality is creativity.
Yeah. So losing that may have partly been why I was so down and out after my faith crisis, because I just felt like I lost my outlet to my creative self.
So I know we wanted to dive into some of this a little bit more. So we've kind of gone through the outline that we plan to go through. And I know we want to talk a little bit more about some of these in more detail, like nihilism and the 4 agreements and how that aligns with our integrity. And so we'll have separate.
And we will definitely talk about nihilism when we talk to Britt. I'm really excited about that. So if you have specific questions that you want to ask Britt Hartley, a spiritual director who has just written a book about nihilism and overcoming that. And she's just one of my favorite creators on social media right now. No nonsense spirituality. So please tell us in the comments, like, what would you love to hear us talk about with Britt? And I think that for this spirituality series, what I'd love to do is get into the books that we read as part of our journey. And so some of the big ones that we talked about that were huge for us, probably the biggest was the 4 Agreements.
Yes.
We also read Martha Beck's Way of Integrity. Remember?
Yeah.
We also read How to Do the Work, Gary Zukav's Seat of the Soul, The Untethered Soul, Living the Untethered Life. Anyway, there's a number of books. If there are others that you would like to add to our list, please type them in the comments, because we are getting ready to start round 2 of our book club.
Yep.
I think we kind of got burnt out on reading spiritual books, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. I wanted to shift into more of like sexuality and relationship. But
that's right. That's where we're going to go next with it.
Yeah.
So the other one I will just say is Nicola Pera, the holistic psychologist.
That was really good.
If there's one account that you're going to follow on social media for mental health, wellness, the holistic
and spirituality, she covers in spirituality.
She does cover spirituality. The holistic psychologist.
Yeah.
All right.
Should
so
is there?
Out? Before we close out, is there anything else you'd like to add
to
this episode?
Was really good. So what's interesting about these episodes? Some of these we have not about ourselves.
Right.
And so
or we'll start talking and we're like, let's save this.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that I heard from Alicia was brand new from just our discussion today. And it's always fascinating for me. So
yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So I am really excited to get into the 4 agreements. So I think for our next episode, we'll talk about the 4 agreements. Then we're going to interview Britt, and then we're going to go into
we'll do some question and answers too. What we've been doing. So this has been really good.
So guys, thank you so much for joining us on our first episode in our series on spirituality. It's going to be an exciting one. This has been probably the most transformative thing since leaving the church, has been exploring spirituality. And please tell us your thoughts in the comments. And as always, if you have not found us yet on Instagram, please go there and find us at faith.unraveled and send me a DM if you would like to submit a question, and we will give a live response to your questions in our Q&A series. Or if you have ideas for upcoming episodes. So far, our biggest questions have been around relationships and spirituality. Like, what do you believe now? And how do you reconstruct your relationship? So we'll probably get into that for our next series.
And if you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe to us.
That's right. If you're listening on the podcast, we would love to get a review from you. But yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, share. And thanks again for joining us today. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks.
We'll see you next week.